Hello and welcome everybody to our premiere and first edition of the IJP Global Fellows Talk as part of the series Reset Germany, what follows after the Merkel era. The Global Fellows Talks look ahead. I'm Marco Vollmer. I'm a member of the board of the International Journalists Programs, IJP, heading the exchange program with the Southern African countries. And together with my colleague Vasilios Theodosiou, I will host this brand new global series.
Hello, I'm Vasilios Theodosiou, and I'm the head of IJP's UK and Northern European exchange programs. Some words on our topic for today. After the Glasgow Agreement of COP26, what is Germany's and Europe's homework to accelerate climate action to keep alive the goal of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees? And after the COP is before the COP, the next COP, COP27 will be in Egypt. The Glasgow Agreement of the COP26 was an important signal for the rest of the world from the states involved, but now it's time to act. Will the EU seize the opportunity and play a pioneering role in climate protection, or are the results just another intermediate step? What are the specific tasks for the traffic light government in Germany to comply with the agreed 1.5 degree target? Will the self-proclaimed progress coalition manage to solve the social conflicts between ambitious goals and blockages for, and example, push ahead with the expansion of renewable energies?
And together with the panelists, we would like to discuss answers and possible impulses at national and international level. Our distinguished guests of today are Lisa Badum, member of the parliament, the German Bundestag. In September 2021, she was again elected. She was first elected as a member of the Bundestag in 2017. During the last legislative period, she was the climate policy spokesperson for the parliamentary group Alliance 90, the Greens. Even before she was elected as a member of parliament, she was increasingly campaigning for the energy transition. After graduating in politics from Otto Friedrich University in Bamberg in Bavaria, she worked as a research assistant before finally joining Naturstrom, one of Germany's 4 independent green electricity providers, in Forchheim, also in Bavaria. Her credo: change does not come by itself, we have to tackle it. Welcome, Lisa, to our IJP Global Fellows Talk.
Thank you so much.
And I am happy to introduce to you Dr. Kira Vinke. Dr. Kira Vinke heads the newly founded Center for Climate and Foreign Policy at the German Council on Foreign Relations. She also co-chairs the advisory board to the German federal government on civilian crisis prevention and peacebuilding. Ms. Vinke is affiliated, Dr. Vinke is affiliated as a scientist with the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, where she led the East Africa, Peru, India Climate Capacities Project before joining the German Council on Foreign Relations. Until 2018, Dr. Vinke was a research analyst to the director of the Potsdam Institute. In this capacity, she worked from 2014 to 2016 as an analyst for the German Advisory Council on Global Change to the federal government, and she provided her expertise as a consultant for the German Development Corporation, the GITS, and the Asian Development Bank. She has done extensive field research in South Asia, the Pacific, and the Sahel, and Dr. Vinke, to her academic credits, completed her doctoral dissertation, summa cum laude, at Humboldt University in Berlin on the subject of climate change and migration. And last year, she attended the climate COP26 in Glasgow. Dr. Vinke, please share your insights with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this thorough introduction.
Yes, and I think we start with you. If you might give us just a little impulse on what you have seen in Glasgow, apart from that's a beautiful city, but what are the learnings of COP26 for you, and what is for Germany to do on the road ahead to Egypt for COP27?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to share my take on the outcome of the conference. Being there, I think the spirit of Glasgow was better than many expected. So there was a lot of pressure, of course, to deliver and to stay accountable to the previous agreements. Most importantly, of course, the Paris Agreement. And I think in some ways, Glasgow delivered on this, and in some ways it fell short. So importantly, the NDCs were updated. So there was an increase of ambition. There were a number of net zero targets announced also from countries that you wouldn't expect this from. So net zero emissions reduction targets from Saudi Arabia, from India in the second half of the century. So this is a positive political signal, so to say. And also there was this political signal to stay committed to 1.5 degrees temperature limit. But at the same time, it's completely unclear how these more aspirational targets are going to be met. And I think this is the big challenge. So for once, the question is, how do we shift investments? And here I talk about trillions of euros or dollars spent annually that need to be invested in order to make this big shift. So there's just this recent McKinsey study that you need to invest over 9 trillion US dollars per year to be able to achieve this, this transition to net zero emissions by 2050, which would be necessary to keep 1.5 degree warming within reach. And so this is a huge amount of money, obviously, and not much has happened in this regard. And I think also at the same time, when we talk about investments, we also need to question ourselves, like, will we just invest ourselves out of the climate crisis? And I don't think this is the way forward. We also need to take down other investments, especially in fossil fuels. And here there is language in the Paris Agreement, in the Glasgow final statements also on the phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies and the phase down of coal. So, but there's not much action to back this up yet. So in the question of subsidies, not much progress has been made. And here I want to also point to the intermediary processes until the next COP in Egypt, which is, for example, the G7. The G7 has also repeatedly committed to phase out fossil fuel subsidies by 2025, and there's no action whatsoever really towards this. So I think it's not enough to just invest in green technology. This is, of course, also necessary, but we need to cut emissions, and this requires really this phase down or phase out from fossil fuel subsidies and fossil fuel financing in general. And we see that the green recovery funds, which have been made available for recovering from the economic side effects from the COVID-19 pandemic, are also there's also considerable investment into fossil fuels, which to my understanding is completely unbelievable, to be honest, but this is what's happening. Another outcome of the COP that I want to briefly highlight before handing back to you is this question on adaptation and mitigation finance, climate finance for developing countries. So this is the $100 billion question. Again, if you think about the McKinsey study, you need trillions to really make this investment. So it's very, very questionable how we are not able, or we have not been able, as a community of industrialized countries, to put in the money for this $100 billion fund for developing countries for mitigation and adaptation. And so there was recommitment to this fund, but it's clear, it's relatively clear, not all the data is out yet, but it's relatively clear that this goal was not met in 2020 and not in 2021. And there is considerable loss of trust from many developing countries in industrialized nations because of this lack of accountability towards commitments that have been made years ago. And I think this is also a task for the new German government with the G7, but also as an actor at the next COP, to show the outside world, both developing countries, but also climate activists in our own countries, that Germany is staying accountable towards its own targets and also holding other countries and their governments accountable to targets that have been previously agreed. If we cannot deliver on this, people will lose more and more trust in these international processes, because it's great to have an achievement like, for example, these updated NDCs, nationally determined emissions reduction contributions, But if there's no backup plan of how this will be implemented, it's almost worthless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kira, for that input from your perspective of a scientist. And Lisa Badum from the German Parliament, what are your learnings from the climate COP? And as we have heard from Kira so far, we need to cut emissions. That is the homework. And what is the new government going to do here? Could you give us?
Thank you, Marco, also for the invitation. I'm very glad to talk with you here in this discussion. So what we have seen at COP is, I totally agree to what Kira says. We have heard countries signed this declaration that they want to end fossil fuel subsidies and do not want to support fossil projects any longer after 2022. So Germany signed, but also Canada, USA, and so on. And I think this is one really important point that we put this declaration to reality. And also China has announced before that they don't want to invest any longer in coal power plants in Asia. So this was also a declaration which was made. And I think those 2 points are crucial because the Western countries explore basically the fossil sources of the earth. So if we cannot stop the money in these sources, we will not reduce CO2. So this is very basic to us, of course. Second point is, in general, at the last COP, we haven't seen a very strong government because Germany was in between governments. Also, the European Union was kind of in a weak role. So for the next COP, we have to be more progressive because I think without Germany, without European Union, we cannot make a lot of progress in this field. So I think we have to be pioneers and also speeding up the whole process. As the German government, the details are concerned, I think you all may have heard the news that we have, sorry, I have to look that up because it's quite new. We have a German government climate envoy, Jennifer Morgan. She was appointed yesterday. Today was the first official press conference, just I think half an hour ago it started. So the appointment of Jennifer Morgan shows that the German government wants to take this thing seriously, and also that climate diplomacy will be part of foreign diplomacy because it's part of the foreign ministry. So I think this is a very strong signal. The next steps, which we see, is of course the Petersburger dialogue and then the next COP in Egypt. And we want to address the topic of loss and damage there. So also the 100 billion, so the climate adaptation fund is also very important, but we haven't seen a lot of money for the loss and damage point. And also it was not officially part of the agenda in Glasgow. So this is important to us. But also in the meantime, we don't want to just wait for the COP, but we want to strengthen our climate and energy partnerships. So, for example, we've started a partnership with South Africa about the transformation of the coal industry there. And I think we want to start a lot more those partnerships to work together with those countries, which also have, let's say, a higher carbon footprint, but also want to speed up and want to have higher ambitions, climate ambition targets. So I think we need the speed alliance, let's say, of those countries who can work together on the bilateral level, because I think we cannot expect too much from the COP or from the UN level, because it's the whole world community there. So we can't just wait for it. We have to take our own steps, and I think these are important tasks in front of us. And also a last point, in the past, in the German government, the different departments did not always work together, and also for example, the embassies. So yeah, the embassies of Germany in foreign countries, they did not always have the climate aspect or the climate focus. So those embassies will be strengthened as the climate aspect is concerned, and the departments in the government want to work together in a better way. So the Ministry for Economy and Climate will join in, and the Ministry for on Environmental Affairs will also contribute, and the Ministry for Development Affairs. So for international, sorry, I don't know the English word, but let's say the Ministry for the Global South will also join in. So I think this to have more strategic alliance within the government, the whole government approach is also a new thing to us. So these are some ideas from the new government on this aspect. Thank you.
And so you think from the legislative perspective, there is a so-called small wind of change already you feel such a momentum of change, Lisa?
I really feel the momentum of change because I think all the relevant ministries are working together, and we haven't had that before. So we have the Foreign Office with this perspective on also security, geopolitics, but also we have the expertise in the climate ministry, and all of these ministries are willing to fulfill something. So of course we need the whole government, it's whole government approach, and also we need the rest of the European Union. Of course, Germany again is part of the European Union, and what we have seen with the taxonomy in the last weeks, I mean, it was not a very good signal in my view for green transformation. So, but on the other hand, we will have the Fit for 55 package on the European level. So the whole Green Deal legislation will happen this year. And I think the Commission has some quite good proposals, and Germany can play a good role here. So this year is, to end this, I think it's really a decisive year. We have the G7 presidency. I didn't mention that before because really so much playing within this year, and we have Fit for 55. We have the next COP. Also, we have the new government in the first year. So I think this year will be very important.
We will try to structure a bit the discussion on these several points you mentioned. Thank you for that first insight, Lisa. Before starting the discussion, I would like to ask our alums, our journalist colleagues, our IJP alums, to participate and enrich our discussion. You can raise your hand if I'm not wrong, or write a question in the chat. And you are more than welcome to give us comments and ask questions. But now, Vasilios, before that, we still have some questions for our both distinguished panelists, and then we go in the panel in the whole discussion. Vasilios, over to you.
Yes, Lisa, you mentioned already the appointment of Jennifer Morgan yesterday and the announcement today. Jennifer Morgan, for those who don't know her, is the head of Greenpeace, and it was, of course, heavily discussed in the German press yesterday, whether this is a good decision, a wise decision, or recommendable at all to do a step like that. I would be interested in both your comments on this decision, on this appointment, setting apart the question of her citizenship and whether she will be able to become Minister of State. Is it really a good idea to have a lobbyist from Greenpeace in the government on that level? Maybe Lisa,
I can start, and then
because it's your party.
Wrap it up. Okay,
yeah.
So this is a very interesting question, and I think first of all, you said it's not so important, but still I want to mention it, that she will not become a civil servant in the classical sense, but she will become state secretary. So this is kind of a special construction, but I think for a very special person with a lot of expertise. So for me, the most important thing is that she was to every important climate conference in the last decades, let's say. So she knows everybody in the world climate scene who's playing a role, and she knows about the negotiations, the problems, but also which part of solutions. So I think she's an excellent choice, and also it's a signal for internationality, that Germany is, she's an American citizen, and she has been all over the world, also in Germany. She also worked in Germany in the last years. So I think it's a signal towards the world community that Germany is open to communicate and to build up partnerships. And this signal was not there before.
So is the government's goal to take over Greenpeace line on discussions then? Because nobody really doubts about her.
I think we all have different roles. So as we also remember of parliaments, as was mentioned before, I worked, for example, in a company. I don't work there anymore. So now my new role is member of parliament, and I think she can handle those different roles. And I think she's aware that she will not speak for Greenpeace, but for the German government. But for me, it's really interesting to have the perspective of an NGO or the experience in the background of our ministry. So I think it's an enrichment for us.
And just to add one, then I don't interrupt it, but just to add one detail, Jennifer Morgan, as you said, Vasilis, is the now still leading personality of Greenpeace. It is not the former CEO of the SAP DAX 30 corporation. It is another person with the absolute identic name, right?
Okay. Kira, from a perspective of political scientists, it's always a little bit tricky to have appointments the one way or the other way. If you leave business and go to politics, it's a problem. If you leave politics, you go to business, it's a problem. Do you see a problem here?
I want to look at Jennifer Morgan as the person, Jennifer Morgan, not only with her affiliation to Greenpeace, because prior to Greenpeace, she was also affiliated with the World Resources Institute, and is well regarded in the general realm of the climate negotiations. So I think she's a talented negotiator, and I think it's not wrong to have somebody who is strongly committed to the Paris Agreement in the government. But of course, she has to prove herself now. I think there will be more criticism towards her if she does obvious mistakes. So I think there's some pressure on her as well, to show that she's now working for the German government, not for NGO anymore. But I think we have to see what she will bring to the table and how she will lead these negotiations for Germany's government.
Okay.
I would go to another point which you made, Kira. Maybe first the question for you. You mentioned the so-called EU taxonomy regulation. For those of us who do not know maybe what it's all about, this regulation aims to define EU recognized criteria for identifying sustainable activities. For example, the minimum criteria is that economic activities should comply with in order to be considered environmental sustainable. And for the Greens, I suppose, for other people also, they were heavily surprised, about the discussion going on in Europe, that they put into this regulation scheme nuclear power, for example, or gas, the gas energy. What is your perspective on that and on the decision being made last week?
Yeah, it is heavily counterintuitive for both accounts, for the gas question, but also for nuclear energy. So I think in both cases, it's not justified to label this as green energy because of heavy environmental problems associated with both technologies. Also, it will not be the future of Germany or Europe to invest in these technologies further, because they will end up being stranded assets, in my view. Nuclear technology has the major disadvantage that it's not competitive economically.
And Lisa, what is your thinking here? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's the wrong decision, and Europe wanted to, or the European Commission wanted to create a 5-star gold label for financial products and for investments. So I think with this decision, we cannot lead the world, or can be an example for the world as a 5-star green label is concerned. So the goal was missed. And that's why also the German government is thinking about further jurisdictional steps if the Commission will not change anything. So that's done. But if the European Parliament, if there's no majority against this regulation, we might take further steps.
We have an icebreaker, and the first question from our journalists in the call here. Jennifer Ranking asked the question, maybe you see it also in the chat. Lisa, could you explain the German government's position on the EU taxonomy? The FDP, the Liberals, seemed in favor of gas, the Greens against nuclear. Will the German government oppose this? I think you have answered it, but maybe just to clarify that, what means further steps?
Okay, so the German government, they sent in a statement to the European Commission, which was, so all the parties agreed to it, of the coalition. And this government said that we don't want to have nuclear energy within the taxonomy. And as gas was concerned, there were some steps. So basically the Commission said that in 2036, all the new gas power plants have to be run by green gas, but there were some steps in between. So the years before, green gas should be mixed within the gas power plants and so on. So the German government stated that we don't want to have this mid steps, but we strongly recommend to hold the decision, or not to change the decision that green gas should be obligatory from 2036 on. So this was very important for us Greens, because obviously gas can just be a bridge technology. And also it's true that within the government, some might see this bridge technology as further or wider bridge than others. But I think the most important thing is that we achieve 100% renewable energies as soon as possible, and that we have a progress on energy efficiency, that we can see in the end in which parts of the economy do we really still need gas. So yeah, it's a bigger discussion, but that was the statement of the German government. Further steps means that the German government might go to court and to yeah, sorry, I don't know the English word, yeah.
Say it in German. Say it in German. We help or we support.
Vor Gericht gegen diese delegierten Rechtsakt vor Gericht ziehen. Einfach.
To go into court, no? I think, is it not? To go into court,
yes,
against this decision.
Yes.
No, right.
Against the decision, yes.
Kira, you wanted to add something? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment on this point. I'm quite concerned that this is true for Germany, Europe, but also for other countries, obviously, that we are focusing too much on gas infrastructure. I think we need to really make hard decisions on which products to retire, which products to replace the measure of production of these products, and which are to be replaced by other, for example, by other materials. So is it really necessary to have green cement? And is it really necessary to have green steel? And for what? To build cruise ships? I mean, we really have to question everything, because we're in a fundamental crisis. And of course, there are some processes where we need these certain materials for certain areas. But in many areas, for example, in construction, these are also replaceable by other materials such as wood, etc., etc. So I'm afraid that we're landing our economy in a past dependency for gas. And this doesn't mean there should be no gas, but when I hear the word bridge technology, it's used a lot, I think of bridges, and bridges, they stand for a long time. And that's why I'm worried that we are investing in these stranded assets that will either lead to environmental destruction, or they will lead to failed investments in the end.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa again, and then we will ask one of our fellows. But Lisa, directly to that answer from.
Yeah, because it's a very important discussion, and I think I'm open for any brainstorms about another frame or word than bridge technology. So far, nothing really came up, but I totally agree that of course it's a bridge to nowhere. So we don't want to drive on that bridge on and on, but we have to see the facts in the moment. So as Germany is concerned, what we inherited from the last government is that we have 50% renewables in the electricity sector at the moment, and that we need a lot more. So, and also we want to exit earlier, phase out coal earlier in 2030. So I think it would be untruthful to tell people that fossil gas will be no longer needed from 2023 on. So, but I think you're right that we have to be, we have to make the preparations for less fossil gas the shorter time possible. So I think that's a challenge, and we need to have a plan to phase out gas. So we can see there are really steps to phase it out, and also the government is preparing that. So I don't know when it comes out or where, but for sure it's on the agenda.
I think Jennifer Rankin has raised her hand, so we bring her into the discussion, and maybe we can make her visible, that you can ask another question. And please introduce yourself so that we know where you're coming from. Please, Jennifer, turn is yours.
Thank you all. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you crystal clear. Thank you.
So I'm Jennifer Rankin. I work at The Guardian in Brussels and a former IJP fellow. And I asked the first question, so I don't want to monopolize the time. I couldn't find the raise hand button, which I really should know by now. But thanks for asking the question answering the question on the taxonomy. But just one brief follow-up for Lisa. I just wanted to check. We mean, would the German government join the Luxembourg and Austrian government in pursuing legal action, or are you waiting to see what the European Parliament will do? And then, if I may, a question also for Kira Vinke on fossil fuel subsidies. What do you expect from the German government on phasing out fossil fuel subsidies? Do you see this as something that will be actively pursued, possible results under the G7 presidency after so many years of non-results? Thank you both.
Should just start? Okay. As the taxonomy is concerned, I think obviously the European Parliament will vote against the delegated act. It's done. But if not, the German government is considering legal actions. We have not yet decided in the end because we want to follow the whole process. But it's in the air, let's say. So we are considering this.
Thank you. On the question for fossil fuel subsidies, I mean, there's a variety of problems with this. So the first problem is that there's no common definition of what is a fossil fuel subsidy or what is an inefficient fossil fuel subsidy. In my view, all fossil fuel subsidies are inefficient. So I guess this definitional question makes it very hard to move towards common reductions of these subsidies. So what should the German government do? I think it should, first of all, put it back on the table. In the first G7 communique on this, there's only mention of subsidies, reduction of subsidies in the section on WTO reform, not explicitly on the fossil fuel subsidy issue. And to remind the G7 that this is actually a goal that was previously announced to phase this out until 2025. And then domestically, I think the diesel subsidy, which is maybe not counted as a subsidy because it's just a kind of tax relief. I think this is something, because diesel is not a bridge technology, as we can hopefully all agree. This is something we don't need to have in place. I think this should be phased out. I understand the difficulties that are associated with this in terms of pricing, etc. But we have to acknowledge that the combustion engine will leave the market eventually. And one step towards this is to get rid of kind of tax favors to diesel engines. So I think I consider this a subsidy. I think this should be done within this legislation to abolish the subsidy.
Okay, before I have the next question, just the reaction bar is in the lower bar. You find a reaction and you can raise your hand technically there if you have a question. As I see many of our fellows here today from all over Europe, I have a question concerning the European energy policy, which becomes more and more strategic question and problem. As we saw Chancellor Scholz yesterday in Washington, not even mentioning Nord Stream 2. If we go and meet our fellows in the Baltic states, but also in Poland, it's very, very much more on the agenda there than it ever has been in Germany. So my question would be, what would be the message of the next government, or what should we expect from the next government? What is their message towards Europe, to our European neighbors who are building new nuclear plants and who have maybe lost faith a little bit in Germany, that their policy over Nord Stream 2 is reliable and positive towards European integration? Lisa, maybe you first.
Oh, sorry.
No, whoever wants to comment, please.
Well, maybe I can start. Maybe
yes, please.
We did a mistake on investing in gas infrastructure in the first place. Maybe this is the message that we should be sending out, that we did a mistake and don't follow our example. And I know this is maybe a bit too radical, but I think this investments in both fossil fuel infrastructure, but also nuclear infrastructure, it's really getting us into a lot of problems. And now we are seeing that we are completely dependent on the price structures on gas that Russia gives us, right? So this is a result of 30 years of inaction in the energy transition. Not complete inaction, I also want to acknowledge this, obviously, but we have to see this price limbo that we are in also in the context of not being independent with our energy supply and not using the energies that are at hand, which is solar and wind. On the nuclear side, there's just, maybe you have seen this recent letter from several former prime ministers of Japan urging to stay to Germany to stay on the non-nuclear path and warning against both environmental risks but also past dependencies of investing in new nuclear.
Of course, I totally agree. As is known, the Greens have never supported Nord Stream 2 because also we thought it was not a good signal, not just in climate neutrality base, let's say, but also towards our European neighbors. It was clearly just a Russian-German project, and other countries were not included. I mean, that's the point of Nord Stream 2. So this is still the truth. And yeah, so I think we have to gain back we have to get back on the way with our European neighbors, and the problem of nuclear infrastructure in Europe, and that several states, also gas infrastructure, want to invest in the fossil energies now and really want to put a lot of money in it. I don't think we can solve this in one day. Clearly, we have to give a good example that it's possible to phase out fossil fuels and to be on the path to 100% renewable energies, because in the last years, some countries lost faith in Germany's path. So I think that's what we can do. And also those climate and energy partnerships and those relationships can be a way, for example, the Ukraine, but also Russia in the future. I mean, why not have a green hydrogen partnership with Russia in the future? Because some days Russia has to transform its economy. So I think we have to work towards this path, but it's a lot of challenges in front of us. So, but in the end, perhaps one last aspect as the European energy politics is concerned. We all have signed the goal of climate neutrality in 2050, and also about the reduction of 55% till 2030. I mean, Poland did not really sign it, but I mean that was quite unclear. But Europe, in general, Europe is in this boat together. And also the legislation we will see this year for Fit for 55 will obligate the states to turn to renewable energies. So I think it's not possible completely to lose this path within the framework of the Green Deal, which we already said. It's a lot of hard work, but I think we have a goal we all cannot just look up to, but work to.
As France is going a completely different way, and there are serious concerns that Germany and France are setting apart on this issue. Will it hurt the European integration process if the two central countries in the European Union go on completely different paths to neutrality? I mean, there are other fields of policy that are involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's very difficult. I mean, those differences between France and Germany were known for the last decades, and we cannot help that in this moment. But I think the problem is that we're focusing too much on the energy mix in the States, how it is right now, and we're not focusing on how to reach the goal of climate neutrality. So if we would focus more on that, I mean, the differences, they would not disappear, of course. But I think we could see everything in another light. So, for example, France did not really increase the number of renewable energies. And of course, because they still have 70% nuclear energy. So why should they invest in renewable energies? And I think to highlight this, this relation, how to get to our goal, maybe this would help us, but at the moment, of course, it's we have different opinions, and at the moment we cannot help that. So I don't see a solution for the next day, but yeah, we have to focus on our goal.
Are there other questions in our alumni circle? Then raise your hand or ask the question via the chat so that we can answer it. If not, we will just continue with another question. We had it in our introduction, Lisa. What is and we tackled it a bit in our discussion so far, but what would you say? What is your impression? Will the self-proclaimed progress coalition, the traffic light coalition, will they manage to solve the social conflicts between ambitious goals, ambitious climate goals on the one hand, and on the other hand, the blockage on the expansion of renewable energy? Because there is this so-called NIMBY, not in my backyard factor in Germany. I think this is an international phenomenon. And are you optimistic that they will solve that challenge?
So you mean the German government, right?
Yes.
I assume so. Okay. Yeah. So of course I'm optimistic because let's just take an example, Bavaria. I saw it in the past. There was a lot of progress towards more wind energy, and we also succeeded in building more projects and participate citizens. Corporations were within the project, cities were within the project, so they got financial benefits out of renewable energies. And then the government Bavaria stopped the whole progress because of some NIMBY people. I mean, that's true. There was a lot of protest, but still a silent majority supported those plans. So I think it's possible to wake up the silent majority and to try again with this transformation. But I think the key point is really to have the participants, the citizens within the process. So Bürgerenergie is the essential key thing, and also energy security for everybody. I mean, that's a discussion we see now, that people with less income have problems with the high energy prices. So it's difficult when the discussions get merged together. So like, oh, because of the renewable energies, there are high energy prices. No, it's because of the fossil energies. and we make ourselves more independent, and we have safer energy system with more renewable energy. So if we can get this message transported, I think it can also be a help. But it's true, it's a really big challenge for the next 8 years. So just 8 years left till we want to have 80% renewable energies in the electricity sector. So it's a lot ahead of us. And my last point, that's why we really need all of the coalition partners within this. So it cannot be just the Green Party, it has to be the whole government, but actually also the other democratic parties. So also the Conservative Party, for example, and the civil society and the companies. So we really need everybody to make this a whole country approach to head towards this path of climate neutrality, because otherwise we cannot.
We have two more questions, Vasilis. We have two more questions from our audience. Maybe Emma Brett and then Jennifer Rankin also raised her hands. Then over to you. Okay, Emma.
Yeah.
Please.
Hello. Do you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm from Sweden and I'm doing my IJP at the moment. I just had a little question regarding renewable energies when we talked about it. In Sweden, there is this big discussion that, you know, also the environmental aspects of, for example, windmills. So is this kind of conflict between renewable resources and protecting the environment? How do you see this conflict going forward? And what do you think can be solutions? Because not in my backyard can also be the backyards of the animals and the plants and so on.
And we take the other question from Jennifer, and then we combine the answers. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Yes, it's a question on the European emissions trading scheme and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Could you maybe talk a bit about the German government's position on that? And then for Kira Vinke, do you see that this could damage relations with developing countries? Excuse me. You mentioned a lack of accountability when it comes to the 100 billion, but I just wondered for some, say, African countries who might be exporting products to the EU, that they could be caught up in this carbon border adjustment mechanism, and potentially could that damage relations with developing countries? Thanks very much.
Would you like to start, Kira?
Yeah, sure. Well, first on the question of basically nature protection and climate protection, I don't really see the tension here, but I know it exists. And I think the question is around communication. This was what I was raising my hand for beforehand. So I think politics in this, like for this kind of complex crisis that we're in of climate impacts, you need better science-society interface. And I think politicians or government in all its branches are a very important mediator in these relationships. And we are seeing this all around the world, not only in Germany, all around the world in the COVID-19 crisis, how important this is to convey why certain rules are necessary and why they are beneficial, et cetera, et cetera. So this is crucial. And I think we need to learn communication-wise from this ongoing COVID crisis for communicating in the climate crisis. And just to come back on this nature protection thing, for Germany, there was just a big report released by the SRU, a body of scientists advising the German government on environmental questions, and they're making some propositions, for example, not to build windmills in like very pristine nature reserves, but also to inform the public of what the benefits and harms really are. Because I mean, nobody's talking about the losses of birds we're encountering because of house cats or because of cars or because of windows, and these are like by order of magnitude much more severe than what we're talking about when we talk about windmills. And I think a lot of people are not even thinking about these things. And so this is very significant. And I mean, we need to also communicate the implications of climate change for the ecological crisis. So for the crisis of losing species and such, these are interconnected. If we don't solve the climate crisis, we will have ecological shifts, which are contributing to a number of problems, loss of species, but also zoonotic disease, as we are seeing again in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think to have a better understanding of these interconnections and why we need this transition, and that we don't need so much area actually for wind energy, I think this is an important insight, and I think the key here is communication. Should I comment on the CBAM thing, or Lisa, would you like to answer first? Okay, maybe just a few words. I think nobody wants trade wars for climate protection, right? So I think the important thing here is to find ways that also developing countries will be able to continue to export to countries within the European Union, for example. So this is definitely a tricky issue. I think this way forward with the climate clubs, I mean, now it's not yet clear what this actually will pertain, but I think it's not supposed to be kind of a hard cutoff, but rather kind of a nudging, for example, towards a carbon price or something like this. So I think the transition, and science confirms this also, it has to be managed step by step. And of course, we are now in a time crunch because of past inaction. So we need to nudge a bit quicker. But I think it is also in the interest of developing countries to cut carbon emissions and to come on a pathway for renewable energy themselves. But they have to ask for the conditions for that to function, meaning maybe this energy partnerships, technological transfers, investments in renewable energy, et cetera, et cetera. So it has to be a bundle of a kind of package of reforms, and not just demands. We only want carbon neutral products in our countries.
Thank you. Now, Lisa, there was a question about the EU emissions trading scheme. I think that was one from Jennifer, and the first question also between for the conflict between nature and climate.
Yes, as the potential conflict between nature and climate is concerned, I totally agree to what Kira said. I think the real threats for nature and for plants and for animals, they are lying elsewhere. They are lying in the industrial way, how we build our roads and buildings, and how we, let's say, how we build our landscape. So I think this is a bigger threat to all the species, and so that's also why the Greens have a lot of proposals that we want to reduce, for example, the building of roads, which we do not need, or of discounters in the countryside. So a lot of things we can work on. I think it's really important that the NGOs they are working together. So in the moment in Germany, the climate NGOs and the nature protection NGOs, they work together, and they made a declaration that they want to support the Energiewende, and because otherwise, for all the species it will be too late, as Kira said already. So I think it might be a conflict in a concrete project. So sometimes, but in the end, the conflict lies on another side, and also in the agriculture, how it is structured at the moment. So all the insects are dying because of the pesticides, and so on and so on. So this is a bigger discussion. As the emission trading scheme is concerned, it says in the coalition treaty that we, as the coalition, support the proposals of the Commission on Fit for 55. So basically, the Commission made a proposal about the emission trading scheme, that it has to be, let's say, tightened. There has to be pure certificates. So in the end, a higher carbon price, to put it in a nutshell. So, and we support this. The details, of course, now the Commission, they made the statement, but the Parliament is also They are working on the topic. So I think the details on the proposal, they will change throughout the trilogue, but basically we are supporting more ambitious plans to reach the Fit for 55 goal, and the emission trading scheme has to be reformed. There has to be fewer free allowances for enterprises, for companies, because otherwise we will not reach our target in the industrial sector. We have not really made a big progress in the industrial sector in the last year, so I think this reform has to come. And CBAM, this is also concluded that we will support CBAM. Of course, the details, they are still, it's a discussion about the details, but for sure the climate clubs will not substitute CBAM. So climate clubs is, as it said, to have a better discussion between the countries about common carbon pricing. So for example, the US, as you all maybe know or do not know, they have not a common carbon pricing system all over the country. So these are things we have to talk about. But CBAM is a separate process, and we want to speed up this process also. So to have those two steps.
It's always a privilege and a pleasure to have the last question as the moderator, and it always has to be a very smart one. So I tried with this one. We are 9 months away from COP27. What would be your best tips for journalists to look out for in terms of themes, topics, subjects? What is coming up? What would be your advice? What should journalists focus on to really get a good scope in the field of climate change? Any advice?
So I would just highlight one point. I think it's very interesting to focus on the global south, the next COP, because it takes place in Egypt. So all the countries will have, they will be there in a bigger number than it was in Glasgow. And I think the topic of loss and damage will come up again. So the whole perspective of climate justice, climate solidarity within the world will play a big role. And I think this is one aspect you can focus on.
Kira.
Maybe just to add on that, I was also going to say to focus on Africa, to look for stories there. I think this is both in terms of mitigation, adaptation, aspirations, also with regards to ideas of youth. I think there's a lot we can also learn and better understand how to move forward jointly with the negotiations, and also to have a solid foundation for the negotiations. I'm really worried that there's this loss of trust and credibility. So I think we can only reestablish this trust if we convey a sense of moving forward jointly, even if there's more ambitious, different levels of ambition and different levels of speed. I think if we stay credible to our partners around the world, this will be a huge asset. So listen to the voice of the youth and take a look to other countries, what they're up to.
Thank you. That's a very good advice. Thank both of you for your attendance today. I think that was our first Global Fellows Talk 2022. Thank you all for your attendance, and I, for the last time, hand over to Marco.
And thank you very much for this last recommendation, so to say, which I totally agree on. On our website, that is an information now for all of our alums. You will find the graphic recording after that call. So we took, Vinke, our colleague, took some graphical notes so that you can find a short summary, written or graphical summary on that talk. We would really like to thank very much to our Member of Parliament in Germany, Lisa Badum, and to the climate scientist, Vinke. Thank you very much for being our panelists today. We have this next talk already coming up on Friday, this Friday, where then we will talk with two journalist alums, with the editor-in-chief of the Taz and the editor-in-chief of the German Welt, about the start of the new government. Also, I think an interesting topic. So here you are also invited again. For now, just again, thank you very much, Lisa, Kira, and all of you who have found the time to follow this talk. Goodbye, take care, and stay healthy. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.